So just a commentary, I noticed you use the word standard and esteemed in the same description of all of this. So what is that?
Was I referring to you? My mistake. Anyway, Nicole. Okay, so let me. Okay, our third panelist, let's see, is Nicole Eversmann. Is a trustee of the Austin Community College District Board of Trustees. She was elected to the board in November 2016 for a 6-year term ending in 2022. At the time of the election, she was the first ACC student to serve on the board. Currently, Ms. Eversmann is a graduate student at the LBJ School of Public Affairs and an intern at the Texas Education Agency in the College, Career, and Military Preparation Division. In June 2019, she was elected to serve on the board of directors of the Community College Association of Texas Trustees. Her position is designated to represent very large-sized colleges for a 2-year term ending in June 2021. Okay, so we have our panelists. Welcome, you'll start.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As the chairman mentioned, I previously served on the Board of Regents of the University of Houston system. And then when my term expired, the governor appointed me to the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. So I have some experience, most of which I probably learned the hard way, but hopefully I can share some of that with you. So my advice as a new regent, first thing is hit the ground running. It's real easy when you become a new board member to kind of watch patiently and think that everyone else knows what they're doing and you're the only person that's over your head and doesn't understand what they're talking about, but really dig in quickly, adapt as quick as you can, and hit the ground running. Determine what areas you can add value in to board strengths. Whatever your specialty is, look at the different, committees and join the committees where you feel you can add value. For example, if you're an investment banker, you might consider the finance committee. If your background is in accounting, you might consider the audit committee. If your background is in real estate, like myself, you could consider facilities and construction committees, et cetera. So pick, what you're good at, where you think you can add value to a committee. Things you need to remember, all universities have a deep bench of executives that work for the university in every field that you can rely on from an execution standpoint. The staff is fully capable of executing any plan on their own. The main job you have as a regent is to set the vision and the mission of the university and then rely on the staff to execute that direction. So they're looking to the board for direction and then they will execute that decision. Coming up with a sound vision for your university is important with legislators. You were appointed to your board position because of your experience. Don't be afraid to speak up and voice your opinion. Think before you speak, because everything you say is on the record. Literally everything you say is on the record. You need to be mindful of that on any commentary you make, because everyone takes it seriously. Always be aware of public information requests. There is no such thing as a separate meeting of the regents. All the meetings are open, and that's very critical. Any member of the public, citizens, press can request any correspondence from the university and you relating to specific items of your institution. So be aware that everything you do, and do it as if you're doing it in public all the time. Everything you say will be taken seriously as a regent. You don't realize the influence that you have, so be careful and think before you speak. For example, if you make a comment that, wouldn't it be nice to have blue flowers in the garden over there? You may show up the next time and there are blue flowers in the garden. Not because they probably thought that you were a horticultural expert and had researched exactly what color is going to look good in the landscape and which species it will survive in this climate, et cetera. And you just made an offhand comment and they're executing on it. So be careful what you say. Issues facing higher education Dealing with students who come to college that are not prepared for college is really the challenge of all the universities in the state. We accept all students in different institutions, and not all of them are prepared for college. Make sure that your institution has procedures and policies in place to deal with those students and get them up to speed as quickly as possible. You're really doing those students a favor and your institution a favor, because these institutions will have to spend a lot of resources and time just getting certain cohorts up to speed for college readiness. Graduation rates. It's a shame to have a student go to college, probably take out student loans, and not get something as a result. A certificate, an associate degree, a 4-year degree. That's a results-based outcome that we should all strive for. Just to have somebody show up, take on debt, do the time, but not have anything to show for it that will help them in their life or to get a better job is a real shortcoming. So focusing on those outcomes is probably your most important task in my view. We owe it to the students and the state of Texas to deliver them something for their time and effort. Costs associated with higher education. When I first became a regent, I naively thought that the state of Texas funded the majority of the cost of higher education in Texas. I was surprised to find out that the state really funds less than 30% of the total cost. All other costs come from other sectors: private donations, tuitions and fees, and endowments, etc. It's the total involvement of the whole community to make a successful university. We cannot just rely on the state anymore to fund programs. So when you're considering new programs as a regent, you always need to be thinking about where the money is coming from. It's important that all institutions be successfully financial, and that the only way they can deliver goods and products for the students is to take on programs that can be financially successful. So they don't have to be successful on day one, but always ask, from a business standpoint, what is the business plan here? What's the projected revenue? How long will it take for us to get to that point, so that it's paying for itself, and other programs that the university values aren't having to suffer to fund programs that aren't funding themselves. The legislative process. Things you should develop, as we all know, the legislature meets every 2 years. They have a priority list themselves. It's up to you, your university, to develop your own priority list, devise a plan, stick with a playbook, determine what's most important for your university in the upcoming session. The board as a whole should determine from a legislative standpoint what is important for the session. Every member will have an opinion, especially those that might be an alumni from your institution in certain areas. They would have their own opinions as to what to do and have their own interest. But it's important to come out with a collective playbook for the session. Deal with the most important things only. Don't overload your request list so much that nothing resonates with the legislators. Approach them with a common playbook. Hit the high points when you meet legislators. Have every regent, no matter whether they're formally or informally involved, hit the high points every time they meet someone in state elected office, so they can articulately communicate your goals for your university. My recommendation is you go meet with the legislators when things are quiet, before the session starts. They're happy to meet with you, but you need to meet with them early while you have their attention. During the actual session, the legislature is covered up with thousands of items they're dealing with, and there's no way it's humanly possible for any of them to really be able to concentrate and focus on your requests. So my recommendation is you meet with your legislators before the sessions, come up with a common plan, articulate your mission. 2 or 3 big items is what I would recommend, and that will resonate with them. Let your ego go. You will be respected because of your position, not because of your good looks, Alonzo and Nolan. Sorry to break that to you, but you'll be respected because of your position. You'll be referred to as the honorable or regent, but don't let that go to your head, because trust me, as soon as your term expires, to quote Welcome Senior, you go from who's who to who's he. So when you return to private life, you'll look around and no one will be there to give you accolades, pat you on the back. So remember it now and don't let it go to your head. So those are my recommendations. One interesting fact that I heard from the comptroller last night, and you're happy to fact check me on it, Mr. Chairman, but he said that 10% of all children under 18 in America live in the state of Texas. Now that is a phenomenal number to me, and to me it just resonates on the responsibility we all have to come up with a workable system, because we have 10% of the kids in America coming up, potentially into higher education, and that's a huge responsibility, so we need to get it right. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, welcome. Okay, so Nicole, I have to apologize. There's the way on my notes your name was spelled is different than it was there. So if you could
That's
just
okay. It's a weird one.
Introduce yourself with the proper spelling of your
Oh,
name.
okay. Eversmann.
That's what I said. Your name tag is not correct. I believe.
Eversham. That's like.
Yeah. Anyway,
That's okay.
I look forward to hearing your remarks.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here, and thank you, Mary, for reaching out to me. I didn't have to travel very far. I'm thankful to live in the beautiful city of Austin, Texas. Welcome. And I'm excited to be here. As he mentioned in my introduction, when I was elected to the Austin Community College Board of Trustees, I was a current student at ACC and later graduated with my associates and then transferred to the University of Texas. So it was all new to me. And this topic of today's panel about what I wish I had known as a new governing board member, it's like, whoa, where do I start? Because personally, I was 21 years old. I had limited professional experience, but I knew ACC really well. I had been there as a student for more than 3 years when I was running, and we have 11 campuses across the district, and because of where I lived and different jobs that I had taken classes at 7 out of 11 campuses. And so I was very familiar with like the different cultures around the district and the attitudes and uniqueness of each of our campuses. And that has served me well in this role. I think one of the biggest surprises to me coming onto the board were how much faculty politics goes on. I was not aware of this full-time faculty, adjunct faculty friction. And so that's definitely something to pay attention to and make sure that you can do what's necessary to support your CEO to just kind of help mediate that friction and keep the relationships in the college in a capacity that people can do their jobs and that they feel valued. And another big thing was just kind of how to do the job. Our agenda packets are more than 100 pages each meeting, and so that's a lot of reading to do when you're not getting paid for this role. So I really approach our agendas making sure that I'm keeping focus on what my role is in this topic, and what is the administration asking for from us with this agenda item? Are we voting on a contract? Are we discussing what we're looking for with the new committee? And so it's really important to posture yourself as you approach each agenda item with, what's my role here? And I also like to, as I'm reading through the information that's provided, think of what is missing. Like, what might I like to also know in order to make this decision responsibly? And just requesting more reports is always acceptable, but Austin Community College has like a lot of data and presentations, and so it's usually already there. We just kind of have to search for it in our emails, but we got it like a few months ago, and so I'm really grateful for that. I think another part of approaching agendas is that I always write every single question that comes to mind as I'm reading them. And then later on, before the meeting, I'll review my written questions and I'll think, is this question curiosity or is this question relevant to my decision? And is it relevant to governance or is it just kind of something that would be nice to know? And that's how I filter what I bring up on the dais, because nobody wants to be there until midnight. So we can't ask every question that might come to our heads, and it's not necessary to the discussion a lot of the time. And then I was going to talk a little bit about the budget process, because there are so many things. As Welcome mentioned, we don't get a lot of funding from the state. And so we're working with tuition, we're working with keeping our taxes low, and how can we prioritize the budget trade-offs that sometimes need to happen? And I think it's really important, and I'm thankful that my board does this each year. They're very mission-focused, and so we have 4 clear goals in our strategic plan, and when items come forward to us, it's notated, like which goal this item is relevant to, and that has come really helpful to keep the mission of the college in the center of budget discussions. Next, I want to talk about staying informed. So, nobody's getting paid for these positions, and I thank you all for serving the students of Texas, but I have found it really helpful just to keep abreast of what's going on nationally, to be subscribed to the Chronicle of Higher Education, or Chronicle of Higher Ed, and Inside Higher Ed, because they send out, on weekdays, they send out briefs that give you like the headlines of a bunch of news in different higher ed sectors. And so that can be helpful for both community colleges and university regents. And everyone needs to follow the social media accounts of your college or university. Like, you'd be so surprised, the news that other trustees are not aware of that I had seen weeks ago on Facebook or on Instagram. And you can get a lot of information and just like uplifting stuff that'll really help you be a good advocate for your college by paying attention to what they're doing, which is often shared on social media accounts. Next, I wanted to talk about board relationships, because I was certainly nervous coming onto my board as such a young person. I was expecting not the warmest welcome. And I'm so lucky how absolutely wonderful the other trustees are, and they really treat me with respect and recognize the value that I do bring, especially as someone who'd been on the campuses for years. But it is so important to take time together as a board, not discussing the college. But we did at our board retreat 2 years ago the Myers-Briggs personality test ahead of time. And then we made a chart and showed where everybody was compared to each other, like who was what personality. And out of a 9-member board, we had 4 women that were ENTJs, which is what I am. And so that was really interesting to me. But that was a valuable exercise because we went through how each personality type approaches problems and approaches decision making. And some people are more hesitant to make decisions because they really prioritize having more data. And so I thought that that was a great thing to do. And I recommend that you do some type of personality test to really get to know your board and work together better. And also, it's important in the same kind of topic to be a unified front as a board, because there are going to be topics that you disagree on, but once you take a vote, you can't speak publicly against the vote that your board took. You have to support those decisions. and stay unified for the college. The last thing I wanted to talk about was the long-term accountability of our decisions. Because even though 6-year term as a trustee is a long time, like the college is going to be around much longer than that. And I think that a lot of people's frustration with government right now is that everybody is just kind of working for their term and their next term. They're not thinking about 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road. And it is hard to make those predictions because Texas is such a changing environment. But as a board, the things that we vote on now matter for decades. And so just remember that as you make decisions and even with the budget. And also pay attention to state goals. The 60 by 30 plan is not something that any of us can accomplish alone. And so I'm very thankful that our lead administrators integrated the 60 by 30 goals with our strategic plan goals. And so we know that what we're doing is headed towards what the state's goals are. And so that's something definitely as a new trustee to become familiar with. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole. That was very good. Excellent, actually. Just a couple of comments. I will echo her recommendation to subscribe. I think that it's, I don't know how much it is, but the Chronicle of Hydrocation, becomes kind of overwhelming sometimes. It's kind of filling up your... It's really not overwhelming the number of emails you get, but it's the stuff you skim and you think, oh gosh, I got to read that. Like, for instance, this morning, there's a big study on earnings by major. And so I just didn't quite have the time to do that, but it's really important. Now, so Inside the Chronicle of Hydrocation and Inside the Higher Ed, and I think that one is free, but I recommend it highly. But I'm still not going to join Facebook. I mean, I'm just not going to do it. I don't care. And I don't think, does the coordinating board have a Facebook account? It does? Oh, gosh. Okay, well, anyway, I draw the line. All right.
You don't know what you're missing.
I'm missing a time sink that I just don't have. I mean, I couldn't imagine. It's another issue, another topic. Anyway, Mike Reeser will give you his perspective as an executive.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the 90 minutes you gave me. I will try to use every bit of it. So my role is, I've been doing this now, 6, 8 years? I think the first time I came, it was because I was an Aggie and didn't know any better, that I could sit up here and lecture to trustees and tell you how to do your job. After a while, though, I got a little experience and I found, holy cow, every time I did this, a CEO or two would grab me afterwards and say, don't forget next year, tell them this. So my comments are from the perspective of your CEO, and they have the benefit of a lot of input from various CEOs across Texas. And I'll refer you to a handout that's in your material. It's either on your flash drive or here. It'll be a kind of a gray and white matrix. We'll turn to that in just a second. So the board CEO governance model is time-honored. I mean, it's been here for a long time, and it's here because it works. Now, it works because it creates in its design a dynamic balance, a balance between those who govern and those who manage. The board are the governors, and the executives are the managers. And that balance is where the power of this system works. Each role has duties and responsibilities. The main responsibilities of the board are many, and you can go to the various websites available in your material. There's a lot of resources about the well-known best practices, and I urge you to look at those. But let me give you the big three. The first is, as a governing board member, your job is first and foremost to protect the institution. You are to protect it from the inside. You're to protect it from the outside and outside influence. And you do that in a lot of ways. You consider and ensure that your audit function is good, sound, and reports well. That's a protection mechanism. You ensure that management has developed a good risk management plan, a crisis response plan. You ensure fiscal responsibility and stability by overseeing the money. You never balance a checkbook. That's someone else's job. But you should know the financial soundness of the firm you run. So, protect. Number 2, this is really important. I usually get hugs out of the CEOs when I talk about this one. The number 2 most important thing is the board should manage itself. It is the board's obligation to develop and practice good, constructive governance practices among its members. And here's especially what I mean, what we, the CEOs, are offering you is this. Every minute you ask your CEO to manage board members who are off on some tangent somewhere is a minute that you have stolen from your institution. Because your CEO's job is to manage the college or the system, not to manage the board. Don't steal time from your institution. The third, and this goes hand in glove with the second one, is your big 3. Select and support your CEO. Your CEO is your hired professional manager. Your CEO deserves your confidence and your respect. If you can't build those for your CEO, I suggest you have the wrong one. If you're tempted to micromanage your CEO, then maybe you don't have the right CEO. But when you select and support, and your CEO is allowed to do their job of managing the institution, then you can do your job, which is govern. So, boards govern and managers manage. And as long as both parties stay in their lane, as long as both parties practice their roles and responsibilities, the governance model of board and CEO works like a charm. It's dysfunctional when we encroach on each other's duties. And I'll give you a handy little clue on how to find out if you may be doing that, and that's in this matrix right here. Now, the first version of this matrix, I actually was inspired by a CEO that's going to be here later on today. I won't tell you who he is, but most of the questions that you'll see on the left side of this matrix are actual questions given to me by CEOs in Texas. The gist of it is this. If you find yourself asking questions like the ones in the left column, then chances are you've encroached over into the management pathway and you're not governing anymore. If instead you're asking questions that look more like the right-hand column, then you're probably governing. And I'll give you the perfect example. This was the first one that inspired this matrix. Actually asked in an open board meeting, how many gallons of gas do we use in our police cars? Were you? Then I know what your badge says then. How many gallons of gas? Now, either the public elected you or the governor selected you to go to a really important job. And I can tell you, asking questions like that is not going to be a productive governance model. I can tell you how that CEO felt. He went, I can't believe this is what we're talking about. So a more appropriate question might be this. Tell me about our energy management policy. Do we practice green energy procedures, and how do we know how effective they are? Now, that's a difference between management and governance. And as you look down through here, you'll see one. This one I always love. Who got a raise this year? Do you really want to discuss in an open public meeting who got a raise this year? Instead, what might be more appropriate to governance is, tell me about our compensation philosophy. What strategies do we use to attract and keep the best talent? How do we know they're working? Those are the sorts of governance questions that a trustee or a regent might ask, as opposed to management. And so if you'll spend some time going down through here, I think you'll get some notions of what those like. I will tell you the one that I actually got asked was, will you hire my brother-in-law? Now later on, you're going to hear some from the legal guys, and you'll find out why that question is perfectly inappropriate. So, chances are, if you either ran for election or were picked by the governor, you're an accomplished person in business or other organizations. And this might not be your first rodeo in terms of boards, but public boards are different, particularly if your experience is in closely held organizations, where you may be used to serving as both the president and the chairman of the board. In that case, the roles overlap in a significant way, and it's easy to be tempted to bring that to the public boardroom. Don't do that. So the distinctions here between governance and management really are kind of like a matter of scale. Stay high altitude and let your professional managers take care of the details. That's what you hire them for, is to do that for you. And while they're in the weeds, you can watch out for the big picture of the institution. So, there's a couple standing questions that CEOs have suggested I offer to you in terms of heading into every single meeting. Does it appear that my CEO is spending her or his time on only those things that the CEO should be doing? That's one that's really, really powerful. If you're going to get the most out of the highest paid person in the college, then challenge them to do only those things that only they can do. And then the second one has to do with big item number 2, self-management. And that is, ask yourself, after you read that agenda, what is it that we as a board can either start doing, stop doing, or change that will allow the institution through this matter to realize its mission? So, boards govern and managers manage. Here's some danger signs in addition to these questions that may indicate you've got the potential to get out of your lane. If you have an office, if you're a trustee, and you have an office on campus, and you spend time in that office interacting with people well below the CEO, you're probably out of your lane. If your CEO consistently brings routine and fundamental day-to-day business decisions to you, then you probably have a problem in the CEO's office, or you've been demanding to see a level of detail that doesn't belong on a governing board table. If you constantly doubt the capacity of the CEO to fulfill the mission and the strategies that you have jointly developed, you have a problem in your CEO's office. And there's only one group that's supposed to fix that, and that's you. And if your CEO spends all their time taking board members out to lunch, then chances are the CEO is having to manage you. And you're stealing time from the college. Finally, if what you want is an outstanding CEO, and I know most of them in Texas, and we have some outstanding CEOs. If you want an outstanding CEO, then be an outstanding board. Be a board who knows its duty and responsibilities, and focuses solely on those. And you'll attract and keep a fine CEO who will let you sleep well at night because they're taking care of business for you. So that's what the CEOs wish they could say to you. And if I still have my job next week, by the way, I have no board members this year. This talk is much tougher when I do have board members here in the room.
Thanks, Mike. I've got a question, and it's at the intersection of, a board being too detailed, and then the value or the performance of the CFO. So Nicole mentioned an issue, which I didn't really understand: adjunct faculty versus something else, right? Permanent faculty, full-time faculty. Okay, so in many boards, certainly not the coordinating board, but in many boards that I've been on, there's this impulse to sterilize everything so that, you have to the board level, it can, take a raw quality. Okay, so that could be the fault of the CEO, but it's kind of the nature of things. Okay, so how do you know, as a board member, how do you find out that there is a real issue in the institution between adjunct faculty and full-time faculty without talking below, the CEO level? So Mike, I'll ask you.
The question that I would expect, and I've actually been asked this, tell us about your workplace culture. Do you consider it constructive? Is it positive and self-affirming? Are your employees happy, and how do we know? Those would be governance questions. So I'll tell you, I got asked that question 5 years ago, and so we went out and we contracted with UT, and every year we do the survey of employee engagement, and we take the results back to the board, and we show the board, here's the results, here's the areas that we're working to improve, and here's the areas that we aren't. It's a wonderful instrument. It's not expensive.
So that's the way you brought those issues to the board. Well, Nicole, how did you find out?
So at our meetings, we have a time for citizens communication. And we also have another section of the agenda where we get reports from associations. So we have a full-time faculty senate, we have an adjunct faculty association. So either that information comes from the association president's report, or it's adjuncts coming in and talking during the citizens communication portion of our board meetings and sharing the things that they're struggling with.
Yeah, so it sounds like that goes to the effectiveness of the CEO bringing the information that's relevant to the board and allowing those constituencies to talk or to communicate with the board. So welcome. You're on, when you're on U of H board, you had a good run in football, but you were not pleased with the defense of U of H. As a regent, what can you do about it?
Well, it's because they didn't use the plays that I tried to send in during the game. Otherwise, it would have been a different result, I'm sure. Well, the answer is you can't, you should not poke your nose in it. You can support the team, financially and emotionally, but the last thing the coach needs, and the last thing the athletic director needs, and the last thing the school needs is so-called armchair quarterbacks trying to micromanage the program. So although it's tempting, you need to avoid that at all costs.
So if you wanted to do that, how about this for an idea? Just buy the team from Jerry Jones.
Okay, well, we have just a couple of minutes if the audience has a question. If not, I think this is really valuable. I mean, each of these perspectives I hope was helpful to you. It certainly made me think when I first heard Mike in particular and other regents and community college trustees talk about their issues. But I think, the lesson that Mike said that CEOs manage and boards govern, that's, I think, a very important message to take home.